Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to move on to the next session, which is data economy and data protection. I'd like to hand over to the moderator, Xavier Piednoir from ETSI. Mr. Xavier, please.
Yes, Kate, I hope you can hear me. I hope everybody can hear me. And thank you for again, for holding this session on data protection as part of this this workshop. I will basically start by stating what I think is obvious for everybody. Data is and will increasingly be at the heart of our economy and of our society. Our ability to transfer, to store, and to process data will impact how well our economy does. Our ability to protect data and to create firewalls between the private and the public spheres, or to put it differently, our ability to enable and enforce privacy will help tell how well we do also as a society. So many regions and many countries have this in mind, and they want to be able to support their economy, to keep the data flowing where needs be, while keeping a citizen-centric approach to becoming a digital society. Korea and Europe have established their own data protection frameworks with this in mind, and today we will learn about the respective approaches and then discuss how data protection and data privacy are compatible with our different goals, with the technology we use, and also with the need to trace some personal information to protect our fellow citizens, as is the case now, for example, with the current COVID-19 pandemic. So let me introduce our three speakers today. First, Mr. Stéphane Mouille from Eurosmart and CLR Labs, a European expert on digital identity and data privacy. Stéphane's presentation will be complemented by a message from Dr. Detlef Udo, a member of the board at Eurosmart and expert in the field of digital identity. He's working from Infineon from Germany. We will also have Professor Hengyol Yoon from Suncheonhyang University. I hope I'm pronouncing this not too bad, and who is a leading information security and privacy expert in Korea. After their respective presentations, we will have an interactive panel discussion. But for now, I would suggest that we hear about the European and Korean data protection frameworks. And therefore, I will now give the floor to Stéphane for his presentation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Xavier. Good morning, everyone, and I'm really proud and happy to be part of this panel today to discuss with you the EU strategy on European data protection. My colleague, Dr. Odu, has prepared a small video. So I will start by a short presentation. My name is Stéphane Mou. I'm director of the Cybersecurity and Digital Identity Committee at Eurosmart. Eurosmart is an industry association based in Brussels, and this is the oldest association tackling a security topic within the Brussels ecosystem since 25 years. I'm also director of the first laboratory tackling evaluation of biometrics technology. It's important to remember that the issue related to personal data raised with the deployment of modern information and communication technology. In ancient time, personal data were written on a living stone in the middle of the desert. So data protection was not really a problem because only few people were able to see what was written on the stone. The need of data protection emerged with the development of light support and modern communication means, with the apparition of mobile communication and, of course, the internet deployment. In the 70s, Germany was the first country in Europe to introduce a legislation on data protection. It was first in the land in 1970 and at the federal level in 1974. France followed quickly Germany with the adoption in 1978 of data protection law, which has been issued shortly after the publication of Mr. Alain Menck report on telematic, because it has been identified in the French ecosystem that telematic will change the economy, but also the society in the long term. and putting data protection at the core of the society will be a key driver. At the European level, a directive has been introduced in 1995, which is the Directive on Data Protection. This legislation is really important because it establishes a European framework for the protection of personal data. It has a lot of impact on the member states because the member states were obliged to set up their data protection authorities, while some countries already have them, like France and Germany, for instance. Other countries didn't have this kind of data protection authorities, and they had to create their own national structure to comply with the directive. And by the way, it was the case for United Kingdom in '98, knowing that United Kingdom has been the first to tackle the public liability with the habeas corpus. So it was a kind of change of rules in data protection. Of course, data protection doesn't stop at the European border. And at that time, EU officials realized that the transfer of personal data to other continents were performed due to the generalization of modern communication and tools. And these data were leaving the EU land. And in the framework of 1995 directive, the European Commission has the power to manage negotiation of international treaty to establish bilateral agreements. And it was the case with the US in July 2000 with the Safe Harbor that was defining the security measures that the US company needs to comply to receive this European data. What is interesting is that in 2007, the European Union has modified their treaty and introduced by default the Charter of Fundamental Rights at the highest level of the fundamental European law, which was a key factor because now the data protection and the respect of private life was legally binding for all member states except for one exception. In parallel of this legislative development, technology has evolved a lot, and we saw the smartphone happening in 2007. Social media like Facebook became hugely popular, and in 2009, an Australian privacy activist named Max Schrems requests Facebook to hand him over his personal data. He was entitled to do so by the 95 directive on data protection. And what he discovered is that Facebook has kept record 3 years of his online activity, including private messages and deleted data. This data was held in Facebook and hosted on a server located in the US. He lodged a complaint in Ireland, but this complaint was rejected. And then he went to a case with the Court of Justice at the European Union in 2015. The European Court decided that the Safe Harbor was not valid and because it was not guaranteeing the European citizen right. What is interesting is to see the legislation evolution in parallel. And in 2012, European Commission has proposed two key regulations. The first one is the EDAS regulation, defining what is digital identity of 500 million Europeans. And a second one proposing the GPDR, which is a General Data Protection Regulation. What is interesting is that in our association, we are also doing some advocacy on the Brussels ecosystem. And during the co-decision process of the EDAS regulation, we have identified a dozen of associations or companies or corporations proposing modification to the text. What is interesting, in parallel, by contrast, when you look on the GPDR co-decision, you have 1,200 stakeholders doing actively lobbying to influence the legislation. And what we saw is that this co-decision was a little bit stuck. And we had some incredible developments because it was the first time that we saw US association asking to the US government to request them to let the European decide on their legislation on data privacy framework. And during 4 years, it was a long geopolitical and economic battle because data are the heart of digital economy, but also digital society. And what's happened with the Max Schrems case is that as the Safe Harbor has been broken in 2015, the US company were in front of legal uncertainty. And then there was an agreement that the GDPR was able to go on live, and something has been placed to replace the Safe Harbor with the Privacy Shield. To summarize, the European data protection model is really based on fundamental right and policy, which are also linked to standards, of course. And now I will just project a video from Dr. Detlef Odou, which is giving the last developments, and then I will take back the floor to have a really short presentation. So, just 1 second.
My name is Detlef Odou, member of the board of Eurosmart. I'm delighted to talk today for the Global International Standard Conference. Following up on what Stefan just said, I would like to mention a few points that are highly relevant to understand the current state of play of data protection in Europe. Over 2 years after the adoption of GDPR, we can say that this regulation was successful in increasing the level of data protection for European citizens, but also in raising awareness on this topic both in Europe and abroad. 2 important figures show this. 69% of the European population above the age of 16 have heard about GDPR, and 71% of the people in the European Union knows about the National Data Protection Authority. In other words, data protection become a popular topic in Europe. Data protection is something citizens care about. This very some survey shows that individuals are increasingly aware of their rights. The rights of access, rectification, erasure, and portability of their personal data. The rights to object to processing as well as enhanced transparency. Individuals are also increasing using the rights, including the right to lodge a complaint with the Data Protection Authority. One specific individual became particularly good at it. His name is Max Schrems. Stefan already mentioned him earlier. Following Max Schrems' complaint, the safe harbor had been declared invalid. Another mechanism, the Privacy Shield, replaced it to enable the transfer of data from the European Union to the United States. Last July, for the second time, Max Schrems won a case before the Court of Justice of European Union. The Court of Justice declared that the Privacy Shield was not valid either. The court stated that the US do not offer enough protection for European citizen data. It was another groundbreaking decision. Now, millions of data are in a legal vacuum. In the same judgment, the Court of Justice said that the clauses used by companies to transfer data outside of the EU remain valid. However, such standard contractual clauses need to offer sufficient guarantees to EU citizens. What can these guarantees be? Encryption of data has been mentioned as a possible solution to provide guarantees. It is an important tool, but even encryption is not a miracle solution. Data can be decrypted. How strong should encryption be? Who has the key for decryption? Do the keys need to stay in Europe? Many questions. All these are urgent questions will need to be answered in the near future. Many thanks. Bye.
Thank you. I think Stefan, this is
Yes.
your
Yes.
turn to go with the presentation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Xavier. Could you hear me? Is still working?
We can't hear you.
Okay. So many thanks, Detlef. So a short presentation to summarize. So we already mentioned the history during the two first intervention.
Stefan?
Everything.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, everything started in 1995 with the directive on data protection. In 2017, the Charter of Fundamental Rights was mentioned in the European area, and when we have the privacy for telecommunication, 2014, the right to be forgotten, GPDR and GDPR entering into force. So I will not go any more on that. What is important is that in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of EU, everyone has the right to the protection of personal data concerning him or her. Such data must be accessed fairly and specified purpose on the basis of the consent of the person concerned or other legislation basis laid down by the law. What is interesting is that in this Charter of Fundamental Rights, there was two opt-out clauses for Poland and the UK, but these are the main articles which are giving the European citizen the right to have privacy of their personal data. If we go on the traditional legislation hierarchy with the Kelsen pyramid, on the top of the pyramid, we have constitutions normally. So for Europe, we don't have one constitution, we have several, because national constitutions are at the top of international treaty constituting the European Union. But what is interesting is that just after the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights is applying, and then we have the international treaty signed by the Commission, like it was the case with the safe harbor of the privacy shield, and then we have kind of law and decrees. The law are the co-decisions, and the decrees are the implementing act and delegated act in the European level. So as mentioned, conclusion from the GDPR 2-year report, there was some fine issued by the national authorities. We have a fragmentation of market member states that adopt specific measures, but as mentioned by Detlef, we clearly see GDPR as a success and need to be reinforced and more harmonized. What is important, as you know, telecom operators have a specific frameworks, and from 2017, just after the adoption of the GDPR, there was a proposal to cover the telecom sectors with the e-privacy regulation. That are still an ongoing discussion, and I think there are some discussion with South Korea regarding this transfer of data. What is important, data are not unique. So I will just give 3 examples, but we have much more segment of data. So we have the personal data, we have the financial data, we have the health data, we have the data which are anonymous, but that can be combined to give back the identification of the citizen. And of course, we have the non-personal data. And these kind of data are segmented and covered by different legislative framework. And what is important at the end is to make sure that these data are available if they need to be available, because sometimes they need to be to stay confidential. They need to be genuine, they need to be authentic, and we need to have a high level of quality of this data. And to make the bridge with the standardization, I think these are key issues to be tackled, to have a clear segmentation of data and to have this 4 pillars achieved by common standards. The question is that how to, in real, to protect this data. So the easiest way to protect this data is not to create them. It means that to not create electronic data, but this one can be a little bit tricky in our modern society. The second option will be to anonymize this data. And here, I think we have a clear challenge to have a clear algorithm of anonymization and pseudonymization, because this technology challenge is still ongoing. And of course, we can cipher or encrypt data and message to access the data. From our point of view, as mentioned by Detlef, cryptography technology are clearly technical and ethical issues, and are the answer of protecting this data. And so that's why Eurosmart is really pushing to have the hardware resistance to potential attack, to make sure that this cryptography technology are well protected and that the private key are in the hands of the citizen or in central system, but protected by a clear certification framework. For us, what is really important is that this data protection model is based on legislation to protect the data and based on the fundamental rights, but there is a strong link with cybersecurity issues. And what we see is that the European Cybersecurity Act with this certification framework is really important because it gives a European framework to make sure that the level of resistance is harmonized within the 28 or 27 member states. And of course, what we see is that in the Article 42 of GDPR, there is a request of certification, and we hope that this certification will be based on the same principle of European Cybersecurity Act to avoid a double certification, but this will help the industry to have a clear framework. So as a short conclusion, Euro data protection framework is really based on our European value. And it's difficult to talk about data protection in Europe without looking at the European legislation and the complete framework. Data protection is a matter of political and economic sovereignty. What about also the non-European algorithm? And legislation is currently evolving, and Max Schrems 2 will put also some evolution. We are quite convinced on that. From the European industry point of view, cryptography and hardware resistance are really important, and these are key competitive advantage in the global game. So some points, room of form action in the travel. We have also some data exchanged by the PNR. We have also some data exchanged by the financial services in the mobile network, and we see some monopoly service providers, and I think the topic which are ongoing on the European level with European digital identity will be also an interesting discussion in the coming years. So many thanks. I give the floor to Xavier.
Sorry. Thank you, Stéphane, for the presentation. I think now we will move to the presentation. Sorry. I think now we will move to the presentation by Mr. Young, which is a recorded presentation, and after that we will then start this interaction with a certain number of questions. Kate, is it possible to start the video from Professor Young?
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Hung-Yeol Young. I'm working for Suncheonyak University in Korea as a professor, and I am currently the chairman of the ITUT study group 17, which is responsible for developing technical international standard in the area of the security. Nice to meet you. My theme today is to focusing on two topics. First topic is on the update of the personal information protection framework in Korea. And then next topic is to focusing on contact tracing systems in Korea and their privacy controls, which is very recent outcomes in Korea. And then I would like to conclude my presentations. First topic, is updated personal information protection framework in Korea. Actually, let me introduce briefly the history of the Personal Information Protection Act. Actually, in Korea, in 1994, there was an act on protection of personal information, which was enacted on January 7 in 1994. Actually, this act was to focusing on the only public sector. So, but in 2011, so a Personal Information Protection Act, which was enacted March 29 in 2021, which covers all sectors, including private sector and also public sector, including public organizations, except telecommunication service sector. Actually, at that time, the telecommunication sector was under Act on Information and Network Utilization and Information Protection Act. So, and then in 2024, Korea have a registration number which is used to identify all people uniquely in Korea. So actually at that time, collection of the residence registration number was restricted. So actually the original purpose of the use of this number is only for public sectors, but at that time, widely used in private sectors. So the use of this number has been strictly restricted in 2014. And then 2016, so actually, for example, registration number is very unique number. So there are some, we imposing we ask all the PII controller to encrypt some uniquely identified information, including a residence registration number. And then 2018, so actually we had three data protection rules. One is a Personal Protection Information Protection Act, and the other one is a Act on the Information and the Network Utilization and Information Protection. And then also there is another Financial Information Protection Act. So these three laws has been submitted to the National Assembly for amendment. So in 2018, on November 15th. Actually, after probably 1.5 years efforts, the amendment to those three we call three Data Protection Act, including a Personal Information Protection Act, was approved by the National Assembly on January 9th, and then it came into force on August 5th in this year. So main amendment has been made to transfer all the personal information protection provisions in the Act on the Information and Network Utilization and Information Protection to the Chapter 8, which is new chapter in the Personal Information Protection Act. So I think that, and then before I think August 5th in this year, there was a Personal Information Protection Commission under the Korean presence, but this commission has become a become a central administration agencies. And also all the privacy related roles and responsibility which was in the Ministry of the Interior and Safety and also Korea Communication Commission has been transferred to the new established Personal Information Protection Commission on August 5th in this year. So let me introduce what was the main focus of the new revised Personal Information Protection Act. So actually, definition of the personal data has been revised. So actually, in the past, we did not have some clause to define the ease of the combination of personal data. So we add a new clause in this in the definition of personal data, whether or not that is a ease of communication should be determined by reasonably considering the time, cost, and technology, etc., used to identify the individuals such as likelihood that other information can be procured. So this is a new added definition. And also we concept of the pseudonymized data has been introduced. In the past, there was no definition on the pseudonymized data. But in this revised act, we define the definition on the pseudonymized data, which is a data incapable of the identifying a particular individuals without use of the or combination of the information for restoration to the original states. And then actually we did not introduce the definition of the anonymized data in this act, but we indirectly define the concept of the anonymized data in Article 58-2. This act shall not apply the information that no longer identifies the certain individuals when combined with other information, reasonably considering time, cost, and technology, etc. So that is a new clause added in this new revised. And then, so before August 5th, 2020, there was some articles, Article 18, Clause 2, Subclause 4, so describe a PII controller may use personal information or provide it to the third party for other purpose, for statistics or academic research. So that information only used for the statistics or academic research. But as I said before, a new concept has been introduced. So in Article 228-2, so a PII controller may propose pseudonymized data without control of the data protection for statistical purpose, scientific researches and purpose, and also achieving purpose in the public interest. So actually, new concept of the pseudonymized data has been introduced, and also PII Korea is a opt-in policy. So if PII controller would like to process a data, every time they need a consent from the data subject. But if PII control make a personal data into a pseudonymized data, so it can be used without consent of data subject for three objectives. One is a statistical purpose, and then scientific. Second one is a scientific research purpose, and the third one is archiving purpose. So that is a very dramatic change in Korea in the data protection frameworks. And then actually, in Article 28, Part 3, dash 3, on the destruction, on the combination of the pseudomonas data, actually, PII controller may make a pseudonymized data from the personal data, and then that there is some specialized institutions designated by the commissions or the head of the related central or administrative agencies shall conduct a combination of the pseudonymized data processed by different PII controller for the same purpose. That is a very dramatic changes. And then let me introduce two cases of the using of the pseudonymized data. First use case is PII controller may conduct a pseudonymized process to make produce a pseudonymized data, and then that pseudonymized data can be transferred to the third party without consent of the user. That is for the only three purposes, as I said before, and then can be used to analyze within the premises of the PII controller. So that is a first use case. And second use case is there is a specialized institution, so they received a pseudonymized data set A from the PII controller A, and also they received a pseudonymized data set B from the PII controller B, and then they combine, and then they transfer or send back to, again, combine the data set A plus B to the PII controller A and PII controller B without consent of the user's data subject. That is a very dramatic change, as I said. So this is a very two typical use cases for using pseudonymized data in Korea. And then combination of the pseudonymized data. So we have a clear legal ground for combining a pseudonymized data from different PII controllers. So PII controller who intend to extract the combined data outside the specialized institutions that combines the data shall obtain approval from the head of the specialized institutions. So I think that there may be some many specialized institutions in the different sector, for example, a telecommunication sector or financial sector or health sector. So if PII controller would like to export the combined data outside the institutions, they need approvals from the head of the specialized data. So that is a very important change. And also responsibility of the PII controllers to use a pseudonymized data has been increased. So PII data must store additional information, needs to store the original data, and also PII controller is required to take a technical, administrative, and physical measures for protection a PII pseudonymized data. Actually, we categorize a data into three categories. First one is personal data, and then pseudonymized data and anonymized data. So we consider pseudonymized data as a part of the personal information. So each PII controller must take appropriate measure to protect a pseudonymized data. And also PII controller who intend to process a pseudonymized data shall keep a record related to methods, including a purpose of the processing the pseudonymized data and third party. So actually, let me introduce. So governance systems has been streamlined after August 5th in this year. So before August 5th, we used a distributed PII protection policy enforcement by three major ministries. First ministry is Ministry of the Interior and Safety, and second one is a Korea Communication Commissions, and third one is a Financial Service Commissions under the ETSI Act. But after 5th, unified and concentrated PII protection governments imposed. So actually, PII, Personal Information Protection Commission, has been upgraded to the one of the central administration agency, and also all grant right of the budget, plans, and the right to the execution, including investigation and disposal, and right to the submit a bills to devise a Personal Information Act. Has been given to the new commissions. And let me introduce another part, contract tracing systems and their privacy controls. Actually, as of today, when this presentation is recorded, we are now going through a second wave. So first wave was in early of the March, and then second wave we are going. I believe that we are now in the tail of the second wave for the COVID-19, according to the World OMID websites. So we believe that ICT technology can be used to flatten the curve on the COVID-19 in Korea. Actually, there's two requirements. So we expect a increase of the effectiveness contact rates. And then also we need to ensure the privacy of the individuals. So in Korea, we have a 3T policy. So test and early test and early trace and early treatment is critical to prevent a spreading of the coronavirus. So we believe the contact tracing is a tool to slow the spread of the virus. But we have three systems put in place in Korea. Epidemiological investigation support systems and application for self-diagnosis or QR code-based electronic entry systems. So there is a need for identifying a legal ground for processing data, and also there's a need for identifying a balance between two contractually requirements. Actually, we identify three categories of the contact tracing application. First one is fully centralized. The second one is a distributed model using Bluetooth technology, and third one is a centralized model using Bluetooth technology. In Korea, actually, we put a more priority on the effectiveness of the contact tracing application. So we are not using a fully centralized models. Actually, we have a legal ground. So before, I think the 2015, there was a MERS, another type of coronavirus was spread in Korea. So at that time, we learned lessons from that spread of the coronavirus, MERS, we call it MERS. So we revised an act on infectious disease control and prevention act. So actually, in general law, as I said, is a Personal Information Protection Act. So in Article 59, for the public safety and security or public health, some provisions in the Chapter 3 to Chapter 8 shall not apply to any of the following personal information. But I think that in these cases, the technical measures are required still. So the right side, infection, disease control, and prevention X. So during the crisis, a lot of the caution levels of higher. We have 4 levels. Above the 2 caution levels, ministry can collect some informations and then disclose the necessary informations to the public. So ministry can collect some personal information such as name, license registration numbers, and telecommunication numbers, and also prescription record of the medical treatment, and also record of the immigration control. So all types of the personal data can be collected by the ministries. So this is a epidemiological investigation support systems. So there is a data controller, participation institute can collect a information data about the confirmed patients for the COVID-19, and then there is some category of data can be transferred to the third party that is a part of the government. So Korea Agency for Disease Control and Prevention, and then that data can be transferred to the other local governments, and then some movement informations can be disclosed to the people in Korea about the movement paths and also of the patients, confirmed patients. So data can be collected temporarily, and then after 28 days, the data will be removed from the systems. Also, this is a privacy control. So when data is collected, minimum data is personal data can be collected, and then all some data can be transferred to the only limited agencies that are responsible to prevent a spread of the virus. And also when transfer is security control, such as a confidentiality, integrity, and the availability should be applied to the data transport from the data controller to the third party. So, and then when data is disclosed, we apply the identification techniques, and then so we make the data to be a anonymous data, and then after 28 days, all data obtained in the relevant controller and third party will be removed. So that is we Korea have another applications, so-called a QR quick response code-based entry logs. So actually, in the past, a manual written entry logs was used, but there was some problems identified. So we identify there was a need to identify visitors where a group infection happens. For example, for the high-risk facilities such as bars, pubs, and restaurants and cinemas. So we designed these systems, and then also we believe that this is a very effective tool to better track a potential infected persons. And also, as of the June 10th, a total 1.14 million cases were used in about 60,000 venues. And this is how to operate a QR code-based entry log systems. So when some people would like to visit some facilities, they need some applications issued by a QR code issuers, and then they use the applications and to submit a QR code when they visit a facilities, and then at that time some information, location information will be transferred to the Korea Social Security Information Services, and then QR code issues may have some personal information over the personal data. And then when a group infection happens, the two personal information should be combined from the QR code issuers, and then Korea Social Security Information Services is part of the public organization in Korea, and then we identify the persons, and then we ask them to test for the COVID-19 as soon as possible. So that is a main data flows for these systems. We have a legal ground, so for these applications, we have a Act, Infectious Disease Control and Prevention Act, and then we also have, this is a consent-based application, so we have a Personal Information Protection Act in Article 15 describe the collection and use of the personal data. And also some of the data collected may include, say, names, cellular phones, and numbers, and the QR code numbers. And then this is purpose of these collections is to prevent a spreading of the COVID-19. And then detention periods is 4 weeks after collections. And then some part of the, as I said, some part of the personal data may need to be transferred to the third party that is a part of the government, and then so that government may combine those personal data to identify a people who has a contact with a confirmed patients. So that is a main legal grounds for these applications. And I would conclude my presentations. Recently, personal data protection framework has been amended, and then the main objective of the amendment is to increase independence of the Commission, Personal Information Protection Commission, and also to transfer some provisions and information that, and then the Utilization Information Protection Act to the new laws, and then to introduce a concept of the pseudonymized data, and to enable the PIA controllers to process a pseudonymized data without consent of the data subjects. So I think that the objective of this introduction of the pseudonymized data is to meet the need for balancing between privacy protection and also data transmission. And we have many contact and tracing systems, so there is a need to identify a balance between the effective contact tracing and also privacy of the individuals. So we also feel there is a need for developing internet standards for best in practice of the contact tracing technology that can be applicable during this pandemic infectious disease crisis. And also some privacy controls are currently put in place for Korean contact tracing systems. We have a clear legal laws in the detention period that has been defined, and then information securities, such as technical and organization methods, needs to be put in place, and then also collection and use and the disclosure limitation principles is applied, and also data minimization, including anonymizations or the identification should be currently is put in place in the current contact tracing systems. So I thank you for your attention, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Two very informative presentation. I think we are unfortunately running quite late with regard to the agenda, so I'll try and keep the question and answers session very short. I just want to note first that in relation to contact tracing and other standards aspect of contact tracing, we have started in ETSI a group which is focused on privacy preserving pandemic protection, as we call it. It is called E4P, the ISG. So this is an industry specification group, which is open to ETSI members and non-members. So I will probably ensure that the participants get info about this group, which basically helps defining a framework and consistent set of specifications for contact tracing systems that use proximity detection methods. So quickly, a first question maybe to Professor Yum. And maybe it sounds a bit naive, but I would like to ask, how is pseudonymized data used in the data analytic environment?
Thank you very much. So I assume you can hear me.
Yes.
So actually, as I said before, pseudonymized data can be used only for statistical purpose and scientific research purpose and archiving purpose in the public sector in Korea. So I think that we have a specialized institute that combines a pseudonymized data from different PII controllers. So we can increase usability of the use of the pseudonymized data in Korea. And then actually we did not have at this moment, have a specialized institutes for combining pseudonymized data from different PII controller, but I assume that we will have a specialized institutes very soon. I probably this October. So I think the pseudonymized data is to meet the needs for use, data utilization from Korean industry, from different sector, for example, a health sector and also financial sector and also telecommunication sector. So we can combine pseudonymized data to increase the data value of the analysis. That is my remark to your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think I have a question that links to that. You mentioned also in your presentation that maybe some specific organizations had been assigned the role of combining pseudonymized data in order to extract the value, I would say, from that data. But we have cases, I think, where these algorithms that pseudonymize the information have to be trusted to some extent, because we have seen cases where information that had been pseudonymized has been then accumulated, and then when you have enough, you are able to undo basically the effect of the pseudonymization algorithm. And so I think I would maybe ask Stefan if there are any algorithms that have been proven to be strong enough against this, or if there is any work in that respect in order to ensure that we cannot really undo the effects of pseudonymization.
Thank you, Xavier. I think what you mentioned is really important, is that with the accumulation of data, anonymization and pseudonymization can be at risk. So I think what I saw in the architecture in Korea, that you have a lot of firewalls in the architecture, I think, to tackle these issues, if I well understood your architecture. And I think one of the answer will be to have some kind of, not to have only one hotspot of this anonymization and pseudonymization, and to have a kind of decentralized infrastructure. And I think in terms of research and standardization, it will be really interesting to have some methodology to perform evaluation of the performance of this pseudonymization and anonymization. And to what I know, maybe I'm wrong, I don't see any initiative in the standardization, and it can be a good topic to tackle in the near futures. I don't know what you think, Professor.
Thank you. So actually, I'm involving in ISO IEC KTC1 SC27 Working Group 5 activities. Actually, recently, I believe that there was a ISO IEC 2889, which is regarding the privacy enhancing data de-identification terminology and classification of techniques. So the objective of this international standard is provide that terms and definitions and concept, and also provide various types of the de-identification techniques. And also this standard address three models of the measurement, privacy measurement models. One is a anonymity models, and then the other one is a differential privacy models, and the third one is a linear sensitive models. So that is a at the moment is a known privacy measurement models. So in Korea, we'll consider this type of the privacy prevention measurement models when we ask a specialized institute, we call specialized institutes, to consider that as the models. So that is, and then recently, I think that in Working Group 5 has agreed to establish one more international standard, that is the identification of frameworks. So actually, that is a current status of that document, is a second working documents. So we see in future that framework. And then ITUT Study Group 17 has approved a X.1148, which is a de-identification process, something like that, define a required step for the de-identification. So we consider that international standard when we conduct a pseudonymized models. So I think that we have, I think that pseudonymized data could be part of the de-identified data. So I think that superset is a de-identified data, so we can apply the de-identification techniques to make a personal information into pseudonymized data. So I think that our system is based on the international standards clearly. So I think that I think that we have a more works for assuring the assurance of the identification techniques. So that is a very important topic for further work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan and Professor Yum. This is indeed very important to ensure that we basically keep up the promise of anonymization and de-identification. Maybe quickly, I ask two other questions. One is, are there any fundamental compatibility issues between some technologies and some requirements of the data protection regulations that we talked about today? For example, in Europe, we have this thing called the right to be forgotten, and technologies like distributed ledgers technologies or blockchain, they kind of build on the fact that information cannot be changed. So is there a way to use both or to combine these things together?
Let me start first.
Yes.
Thank you. So we Korean community, privacy community, also consider the issues. And then, as you may see, the nature of the blockchain technology, distributed technology, cannot modify data which was written in the distributed ledger. So, but I think that we have many other alternatives. So, technical alternatives, that is to use off-chains rather than on-chains. So we put a hash value of the personal data, and then there is a link between data in the on-chain and the real personal data is stored in the off-chain. So we use a hash value of the personal data in the off-chain to connect the data linkage to provide a linkage between the data in the off-chain and then the real personal data in the off-chain. So I think that it is a kind of this technical solution, but I think that there are many other issues we need to consider in the future. So I think that is my response to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maybe Xavier, just to complement in the European perspective, what is discussed in a sense in the deck, it's the same approach, is to have a kind of pointer which is stored in the blockchain and to have the data of the blockchain in other database which can be managed by several organizations. And then you remove the link between the pointer, which can be a hash value or other objects, and then you are able to delete the data which are stored in the other database. So I think we have the same understanding from the European point of view.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to conclude with one last question to Detlef. And that would be a very simple question. Why is this data profiling such a big topic in Europe?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The point is, every visit at the web in the net, you create a kind of footprint. And if you use this every day, then a lot of information moves into the web. And based on this, you can get very simple person-related data. For example, if you type your name in the web in Google, for example, and ask for your picture, you can see a lot of photos which are on the web and you cannot delete this. I give you another example. If you type in my name and look for a patent, you see my private address in the web. So this is for me a kind of profiling, and such kind of profiling is one big topic in the future for data protection in Europe. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think we will keep it there just to not to run too much over time. I would like to thank you very much for your contribution to that discussion and look forward for future interactions. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, and it was a pleasure to be present. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.